Happy New Year and happy holidays, everyone. Today we're taking a look back at some of the most compelling conversations we've had on the podcast this last year surrounding the case against Alex Murdaugh.
This is the Hidden Killers podcast with Tony Brueski.
Featuring defense attorney, Hidden Killers daily contributor, and host of the Defense Diaries podcast, Bob Motta.
Is this just a culture of corruption there where, I mean, obviously Alec, had been in these courthouses for many years doing his bidding and all of his accomplices that helped him with this and that. So it seems like shadiness is pretty common. Not saying everyone there is by any means, but there seem to be quite a few. But to this level, is it just a product of how they've operated? And the other question is, what other cases has she been involved with? And
that's the big question.
And where did she want those to go? And was it just Murdaugh that she had this vested interest of going and making these statements? Or has she always been a chatty box on this sort of stuff and trying to influence on what her opinion is to every jury?
That is the $1 million question. I want to address that one first, because if this all shakes down the way that we think it's going to shake down, and I'm of the same mindset that you are, I absolutely believe these affidavits. I cannot see any reason whatsoever why these jurors would be making this stuff up out of whole cloth. And the fact of the matter is, if we're to believe Harpootli and Griffin, they met them all independently. And they weren't advising any of the other ones, well, hey, this is what they said. Is that true? Type of thing. They were all giving the same statements about her going into the, the bathroom or a separate room with the foreperson of the jury for, 5-10 minutes at a time. The things that she was saying, they all heard the same things. So I have no reason to believe, as I sit here now, that it's not true. That's just like, no one has been able to pose something other than like a huge conspiracy that will require like a lot of moving parts and a lot of loose lips, that, the kind of conspiracy that is really difficult to keep under wraps just because there's so many people involved. There's always somebody that caves, so it's like, you're either going to believe that, or you're going to believe that. I'm choosing to believe the jurors. They just have no stake in the game. If they were going to try to make money on a book, they would have done it right after the case was over. They're not waiting 6 months, and they didn't go searching this out. People are like, well, why didn't they come forward then? They probably, if they had not been approached, they probably had no idea. They would have gone to the grave. They didn't necessarily know that anything was wrong with it. But now, obviously, when the attorneys are coming in and say, oh, well, she shouldn't have been doing that for, that was verboten. It's not allowed. Then of course they know. But sitting there, like I was saying, I mean, these are lay people that aren't attorneys, that don't deal with the system. It's all brand new to them.
Sure.
It's the same thing I talk about on my podcast constantly. I'm like, I explain the law to the people who listen to my podcast because I'm just assuming that they love true crime, but there's going to be things that they just aren't 100% clear on what it means.
Exactly.
So I try to educate them so that their enjoyment rises, because they now know, oh, well, 2 days ago, I didn't know what that means. Now I do. Now I'm enjoying this even more because I understand context. So it's the same thing with these folks. But man, if it turns out that all of this is true and she did this, two things may happen. One, every juror that had her as the person who was hand-holding and doing all the concierging, whatever you want to call it, with the jury, they're going to say, man, she did the exact same thing in my trial. He kept talking about the defense. So if that happened, I would imagine there's going to be other jurors in other trials that may come forward, or you're going to have everybody that had a case in that courtroom where she was sitting there and she was handling the jury. They're all going to get looked at. And every jury, it's like one of those nightmare scenarios where, like, when you have a prosecutor that gets outed that was cheating, that they've been doing shady stuff. It's like you have to review, or a cop, like all their cases. You have to review all of them, especially if there's a pattern, So, man, it could be an explosive nightmare. Now, to go to your first question, I don't know. I don't know if it's the area. I think there were different levels of culpability as far as the people that were, aiding and abetting, assisting and co-conspiring with Murdaugh in terms of getting the money. I don't think that they were quite as culpable. Obviously, a lot of them have been sentences, so they're culpable to a certain extent, but they weren't the masterminds. They were like a cog in the machine.
Sure.
However, what they were doing was illegal. You know what I mean? And they knew better.
Yeah.
So, and that boils down to relationships. It's like, it's that type of area. He was that type of guy where he had those types of relationships and he leveraged them, and he used them and he used people. Like, I mean, that's the one thing they always said about it. I mean, the guy's superpower was being able to sway people with his words.
Yeah.
Like that was the whole thing about, his narcissism or whatever you want to call it, his massive ego in terms of him deciding to testify because he thought that he would be able to convince the jury, just like he's been able to convince everybody else during the entire course of his life of everything. You know what I mean? So, I mean, I don't know where it lays, but, like I think with Becky Hill more than anything, I think that she got sucked into that moment. Like it was just the whole world was watching. Yeah. It was literally one of those trials. They happen, once every 2 decades?
And she was
like literally, I mean, there's been big trials, but I like OJ and then this.
And she was
there's been a bunch in between that have been very interesting, that have been captivating, that we've followed, but nothing like these two. They're the 2 biggest cases that I can remember in terms of just moving parts and just fascinating to watch, like a burning car wreck.
Very much so. And she was right next to the flames. So, and apparently
toasting marshmallows,
that was too much of a temptation for her if this is all true. Let's play devil's advocate for 1 second. What if she isn't lying? What if all these things did not actually happen? What if some of this is fabricated, or what if some of this is blown out of proportion by Murdaugh's attorneys? I mean, there obviously would be massive repercussions for them as well. Man. Would there not? I mean, so that's why it's like these two, I know, Harpoodlin looks like he's about ready to retire. Griffin's got a handful of years left on him. In his mind,
he's been retired for years.
So, but they're not like willing. I don't think either of them want to go out on something like this where they're making shit up for Alex Murdaugh. So that's why
and they're like disbarred, shamed, and most likely arrested for suborning perjury. Because make no mistake about it. Yeah. If they went in there in any way, shape, or form, massaged these witnesses to tailor their statements to fit the statute in order for them to get a new trial, that is unequivocally suborning perjury. Yeah. That without question. It's like these are sworn witnesses. Like people need to understand affidavits. Yeah. People that give them are called affiants, and the affiant, like typically the way that we do it, and people are like, oh, well, Poot or Griffin wrote the affidavit. I'm like, well, yeah. I mean, you're not going to expect lay people that have never written an affidavit to write an affidavit. It's a legal form. It's a document. Yeah. So, but like we've used hundreds and hundreds of affidavits over my career. And typically what we do is we go in, we interview it, we typically tape record it, and they say their piece. Yeah. And whatever that is. And if it turns out that, I handle primarily criminal stuff. So if I have a recantation, my heart's going 1,000,000 miles an hour in my chest. I'm like, holy cow, man, I got to get this thing. Like, I got to get an affidavit immediately before something changes, before somebody approaches that person, before somebody it's like whatever they're telling me at this point in time is their truth in this moment of time. So like, I'm running back to the office. I'm preparing the affidavit. I'm putting it in front of them and say, I need you to read every single word of this carefully. Yeah. And I need you to make sure that it's 100% accurate as to what you said to me, because you're swearing to it right now and it's going to be sworn testimony. And then if they sign it, it is what it is. It's sworn testimony. It's no different than if that person was sitting on the stand and had been sworn in. It's the exact same concept. Yeah. So, man, because if they did that, dude. Yeah.
It's so unlikely. It doesn't make any sense why they would. I'm addressing, some of the folks out there on social media where, well, it's Jim Griffin. And
that's what I'm talking about.
You may not like that they represented Alex Murdaugh, but they're not about to slit their own throats for the hell of it.
Exactly. For him. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like, they're not gonna destroy their lives and their integrity and their family name for Alex Murdaugh. No, they're just not doing it. It's not happening. It's like you think a state senator, and people hate them because they hate Alex Murdaugh. And it's they have to do their job.
They're doing their job.
I get it. I get it. That they, people like to impute the hatred that they're feeling for the guy, the monster, onto the lawyers, but. My God, they're just doing their jobs.
They are.
They're hired to do the jobs. Everybody makes mistakes in terms of whether it's the state or the defense. And, and that was the type of trial where people were picking up on every single word that was said, every action that was taken. So if anything seemed even remotely slippery coming from either side, they were getting called on it. You know what I mean?
Yep.
The hate from Murdaugh has oozed onto these two guys, and people detest them as much as they detest Murdaugh. I get it to a certain extent, but at the same time, I am a defense attorney.
Yeah.
We have a job to do. We're absolutely critical. And this is why. Like these types of reasons are why. Because had this slipped by and had this jury pool been tainted or tampered with by this woman, I mean, it creates such a slippery slope. And to go back to her and to kind of the point, like, I don't think this is the first time. Like, she seems so comfortable with it.
Yeah.
That when I see people that comfortable in terms of doing things that are not allowed, I'm assuming it's not the first time that they've done it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I just get that feeling, not just with her, but with anybody. Anybody that's reached a comfort level of breaking the law to where they're able to do it without batting an eye. It typically tells me that it's not the first time that it's happened.
I think I think she's got some reps in on this, whether or not she has to know that's not okay. But again, that's where I went back to saying, is this just how they operate a lot down there? I mean, it's wrong. You can't operate that way, but now they're finally being called out on it. Maybe. I don't know.
Dude, I don't know. It's a very small county. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? And it's like everyone knows each other. Yeah. It's super close knit, and until it's not, everyone adored Murdaugh until they didn't, until they realized this guy's a monster, but like up until that point, he was adored. Their family was adored. They were treated like royalty down there until they weren't, but it's like everybody knows everybody down there. It's like the players all know each other. And it's like that in every county. I mean, my county's definitely bigger, but I know every lawyer. I see them all the time. We're communicating all the time. It's like we're handling cases on the other side all the time. So it's like you have these relationships and they exist. When the house of cards starts to tumble down, that's where people will shake out on different sides of it. And that's where we're at now. So, I think that there was a huge amount of old boy network cronyism that was going on down there forever and ever, for as many generations as the Murdaughs have been running it down there. I think that that's all been part of the game. And I think that's come to an end. And I think it died with Murdaugh down there. But man, it's like leading up to that, it's an old habit that's going to die.
Hard.
You know what I'm saying? It's like, it's not going to fade away overnight. So, I mean, man, I don't know. I don't know what was going on down there, but if this thing's true, it just blows my mind. Mm-hmm. And the bottom line is this guy's not walking out of prison. No, this is never about him. He's never going to be walking out of prison. If it has to be retried, I have every hope that he'll be convicted again because and I have a different theory. I think he's 100% accountable. I just don't necessarily think that he was the trigger guy. I think that he hired him, guys. But that's my theory. It's for a whole different episode. No, I can flush it out. Yeah. But there's just things that took place that make more sense to me in terms of it being that. But if he hired two guys to kill his wife and his son, it's the same as if he pulled the trigger. Exact same. He's guilty of the same crime. So,
and I've been wondering about the same thing myself, and I'm kind of with you on that because there's a lot that doesn't add up. That's necessarily he pulled the trigger, but he certainly has knowledge, in my opinion, or he was there, or he hired somebody, or it was a hit of some sort, and you take out the family and you leave the person. I don't know. I mean, my thought is maybe there was a threat on the rest of his family too if he talks, and I don't know. I mean, it can go anywhere at this point. But what?
I mean, nothing's off the table.
No, nothing.
You're consuming the Hidden Killers podcast.
Want more? Start binging on all of our true crime podcasts right now through Apple Podcasts and get an ad-free experience when you sign up to be a True Crime Today Premium Plus member exclusively on Apple Podcasts.
More of the Hidden Killers podcast dropping soon.
Press subscribe now.